Hi, I'm Brian Crombie, and we're going to be talking on the Brian Crombie Show. We're going to be talking about politics, arts, business, and social issues on the Brian Crombie Show on Canada One TV. Good evening, and thank you so much for the honor of inviting me to be one of your speakers at this conference. It is my pleasure to come to you from downtown Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I had the pleasure a couple years ago of coming to Lagos, Nigeria, and speaking to a conference here. I've got a slide of me making a presentation, and my presentation then to a conference of small and medium-sized business was Africa is the continent of the future, and I got to tell you, I still believe that today. So, you know, the first question you might ask is why should you listen to me? Well, let me give you a couple of reasons. Number one, I've got a Harvard MBA, so I've studied business, and I specialized at Harvard did a mini thesis on international trade. Second of all, I've had a great, I think, experience working for numerous different companies, Disney, Molson, Bioville. I've been in a bunch of different industries, pharmaceutical, entertainment, etc. And I'm currently doing a thesis in my doctorate in business on economic development. So for all those reasons, I think you should listen to me. And, you know, I've had the privilege, as you can see in this slide that just went past, of me speaking to a bunch of people. Africa is got an incredible diversity. It's a diversity in social class. It's got a diversity in income level. It's got a diversity in different countries with different populations, different population densities, different populations per capita. And the vast majority of people in the West don't understand Africa. And so one of my messages to you is somehow we've got to educate the people around the world about what Africa is all about. And you know, one of the things that I find most interesting about Africa is that because of the Mercator map that we typically look at, because what it does is it takes something that is a sphere and makes it into a column, we don't realize how big Africa is. And if you actually took the United States, India, China, and most of Europe, that would actually fit into Africa. And so I think that Africa is far bigger than the vast majority of people around the world realize, and that changes people's perceptions. The bottom line of my answer, of my thesis, is that global business leaders who misunderstand Africa run the risk of missing out of probably one of the 21st century's biggest opportunities. So let me give you a couple of statistics. 1.2, 1.4 billion people live in Africa. Can you go back one slide, please? 1.2, 1.4 billion people currently live in Africa. No, forward a slide. And second of all, it is the fastest urbanizing region in the whole world. Right now, something like 50% of the people in Africa live in cities. It's going to be 70–75% within the next couple of years. Third of all, the income per capita of the cities is double that of the balance of the countries. So you've got a fast-growing continent that is urbanizing, and the urban areas are wealthy. In Europe, and North America in the 19th century, over the course of about 100 years during the Industrial Revolution, you had that kind of comparable urbanization, population growth, and per capita growth within those urban regions. China had a similar kind of economic opportunity, economic growth for about 30 years after Deng Xiaoping and the treading across the stream on waters. Africa is set to go through the exact same changes. In North America and Europe in the 19th century, China in the 20th century, there was a GDP growth of 1,000%, 10-factor increase. That's what I think is going to happen potentially in Africa in the 21st century. The World Bank says that small and medium-sized companies create 77% of all the jobs. Mid-sized companies create jobs twice as fast as the balance of the economy. Consumer spending is bigger in Africa today, or it will be bigger in Africa than in India. And there are twice as many smartphones in Africa than there is in North America. Africa is the continent of the future. McKinsey did this fascinating analysis, and they talked about how Africa growth was being very divergent. If you take a look at the countries on the left-hand side of this chart that had the Arab Spring, they were growing and slowed down. The oil-producing countries were growing and have slowed down, but not nearly as much. And the balance of Africa is continuing their growth. And so you've got this growth in Africa that's sort of balancing out and going to other areas of Africa that historically have not grown nearly as quickly. Second of all, there's $5.6 billion, according to McKinsey, of additional business opportunities, business growth in the next 5 years. It's unbelievable. And it's going to be primarily in manufacturing. What they talk about is that there's only 400 companies that are above $1 billion in sales, and that could double or triple in the next 5 years as medium-sized companies become big companies. And of those 400 companies that are above $1 billion in sales, there's not one that's in the Fortune 500, and McKinsey believes that's going to change fairly dramatically. So what are some of the government imperatives that governments need to do? They've got to put in better infrastructure. They got to put in better legal systems. They got to ensure people aren't worried about corruption. Government is one answer to this problem, but the bigger answer is what you, the business people of Africa, can do. Next slide, please. Technology, I believe, is creating opportunities in Africa and African businesses to actually leapfrog ahead. If you take a look at what happened over the course of 50 years in the United States and Canada, that occurred in 10 to 20 years in China and is going to happen in 10 years in Africa. As you think about, in Africa, you don't have to put down landlines for telephones and cable. You're going straight into to mobile markets. So the financial services businesses, the retail businesses, and the wholesale businesses are opening up whole new markets in Africa that just didn't exist before. Next slide, please. This is an interesting slide that McKinsey put together of the different growths of different regions and where the growth is. And if you study this slide, it's fascinating because what you can see is that there is certainly huge sizes of business in South Africa, but in other countries across Africa, the businesses may be smaller, the opportunities may be smaller, but the growth is as big, if not far larger, than in South Africa. So South Africa has been such a dominant player in all of Africa in the past, but it's happening in Egypt and Morocco and Tunisia and Zambia and Algeria and Nigeria. You take a look at Nigeria in this graph with 20% growth in some sectors. So the opportunity in Africa is growing across Africa and in different industries across Africa. Next slide. 3/4 of the potential growth in manufacturing could come from just substituting manufacturing from imports from other places. And let me stop and talk to you about this a little bit because it's fascinating. I did a major study on free trade around the world when I went to Harvard Business School in 1988. And it was interesting because what Canada had done is a similar strategy. And maybe you don't realize this because Canada, one of the G7 today, fairly developed country, was a resource-oriented, and in some places, frankly, still is a resource-oriented country, just like some countries in Africa, maybe like parts of Nigeria and elsewhere, back 75 years ago, 50 years ago. But what happened in early 1960s, they signed, and going into the 1970s, an auto pact with the United States that demanded that if the Americans were going to supply autos to Canada, a certain amount of each car had to have Canadian content into it. And that really started the development of an industrial base in southwestern Ontario, central Canada. And a lot of people don't realize what a massive change that was, because before that, we really were far more resource-oriented than a lot of people would think of today. And that really was one of the major critical starting points to the industrialization of central Canada. Up until that time, very agricultural, very resource-oriented, hewers of wood, drawers of water was the line that was used. And that then succeeded through numerous different evolutions of trade policy in Canada, culminating in 1988 with the signing of a free trade agreement between Canada and the United States. What that free trade agreement did, number one, was provide access for Canadians to sell into the United States. But very importantly, it gave a lot of other people around the world an opportunity to get into the United States market via Canada. Comparable, frankly, to what we all know about getting into China via Hong Kong. So that free trade agreement was critically important. Also really important, which a lot of people forget, was that the Canadian currency went from par with the US dollar to 70 cents of the US dollar in the 3 to 4 years after the negotiation of the free trade agreement. So what happened? It was content, import substitution, free trade, and reasonably priced labor and goods, all contributed. When you take a look at that industrialization that occurred in Canada, a lot of it, to start with, was import substitution. Rather than coming up with something brand new, all we were doing was replacing the imports that we were bringing in from the United States or from Britain. And so, bottom line, I think one of the areas that you should be looking at, Africa should be looking at first, is what you should be building and growing and producing in Africa, rather than bringing it in from the UK or bringing it in from the United States or bringing it in from around the world. So import substitution is a key thing. If you take a look at the opportunity that this would create, you take a look at this 2005, 2015 projected to 2025 growth of a huge amount of money. And where is it going to come from? Regional processing and food and beverage, global innovations, resource intensive, labor intensive. The biggest is this global innovation for local markets. The opportunity that you've got to accelerate the development of development in Africa, I believe, is incredible. Next slide, please. So foreign manufacturers that have high market shares in categories that could be produced in Africa more easily and more cheaply should be your #1 focus. Import substitution. Next slide. And so this is an interesting chart that takes a look at the large companies across Africa and how much profit they're making and what the opportunity for growth is. And if you take a look at this, there's a lot of import substitution, healthcare opportunities, utilities, etc., where you can grow at extremely high rates and get good market shares and profit. And really compete with your global competitors. You can grow faster and get market share. Next slide. So I think it's clear that African manufacturing has not yet achieved its full potential. Just like Canada back in the 60s and 70s hadn't achieved its full potential. Just like China in the 70s and 80s hadn't achieved its full potential. And that is the opportunity that you've got. Light manufacturing, import substitution, food processing, etc., where you've got growing and profitable areas, genuine opportunities for you to emulate what Canada did, what China did, what other countries have done with import substitution, light manufacturing, etc. This urbanization is something that you're well aware of. A couple of years ago, there were only 5 cities above 10 million people in Africa. Today, there are 15 large cities. And so Africa is urbanizing and large cities are growing. You know, when I went to Lagos for the first time a couple of years ago, I was astounded. There are as many people in Lagos, Nigeria, as there are in all of Canada. And you think about, you know, the consumer clout, the demographic opportunity, the customer base, the workforce. You have got that. Median average age in Africa of 20 years old versus double that in the West. And where, you know, demographics are growing, populations are growing in Africa, albeit at slower rates than in the past, while Japan is declining. China is flattening, if not declining. The Western world needs immigration to stay stable, if not grow. So, you know, I think it's a huge opportunity, and urbanization is one of the major factors. And with urbanization comes infrastructure. You know, I'm chairman of a civic advocacy organization in Toronto called Transit Alliance, and we're talking about what we can do from a transit standpoint. As I was driving around Lagos, I was amazed at the LRTs that you're building right down the major highways, in the highways that are being built, in the airports that are being built. You know, huge amounts of infrastructure investment that creates jobs, creates opportunities, makes goods and people move faster. Infrastructure is a huge opportunity. And real estate development is an incredible opportunity. You know, this was a major development when I was there that I was shocked to see, of building a whole new city out in the ocean. And that was just one example. Real estate development, new construction. A friend of mine is building a $150 million development in Angola. He's a real estate developer from Kenya originally, but emigrated to Canada, lived in Canada for 40 years, and now is going back and developing in Angola. So the opportunities for urbanization, real estate development, infrastructure investment are excessive. Incredible. Incredible. And you know, you see these LRTs, you see these freeways, you see these airports. It's going to create investment opportunities, it's going to create opportunities for employment, and it's going to spur, I think, even greater urbanization in the future. And so, how are you going to win in Africa? And I think this is a really interesting slide. It's well worth taking a look. This comes from McKinsey after a major report that they did, but I agree with it completely. The first thing is you've got to have an African strategy on its own that is a pan-African strategy. And you got to think about, you know, how you can exploit the increased regionalization of Africa. I think Africa in the past was a country-by-country opportunity. Today, it's more of a pan-African opportunity. The second thing is you've got to make sure that your business model works. Which makes sense all the time, but I think it's even more important when you're thinking about the incredible opportunities for growth, that you got to get the business model right. You got to figure out what you can do to accept and exploit that Pan-African opportunity. And then what you got to do is you got to build resilience for the long term, because one of the challenges that you're going to have in Africa, and you know what, people say, oh well, we got corruption and we got political issues and we got religious issues and we got potential civil wars. Well, you know what? You had that in the 19th century in North America. You had that in Britain during the Industrial Revolution. You had that in, you know, Canada arguably during its industrial phase in the 20th century. You certainly had it in China and in Vietnam as they were going through what they went through in the course of the last 30 to 40, 50 years. And so it's not that different, but you've got to build up that resilience. You've got to be able to deal with political strife. You've got to be able to deal with corruption. You've got to be able to deal with demographic changes, population surges, and all those other things that you're going to be faced with. And then finally, you've got to, I believe, unleash Africans' latent opportunities. And so you've got to think about some of the social issues, the inequality issues, the religious issues, the hunger issues, the poverty issues, the education issues. And if you can at the same time have a Pan-African opportunity, have a great business model, be resilient, and at the same time think about how you can address some of those problems that Africa has, I think you're going to find the perfect secret to success in a African successful business model. When I was in Africa, I had an incredible opportunity to meet the people. I had a friend, a host from Canada that took me around, Ade. He introduced me to people in laboratories and people in business offices and people in bars and restaurants. And I think the biggest strength you have is the wonderfully welcoming, humorous, talented, intelligent, creative people. And in every society that grows, that social capital that you create, that desire to work together, that innovative, creative atmosphere is probably more important than everything I've talked about to this time. And I think you've got it in Africa. And what you need to do, I believe strongly, and what I want to participate in and what lots of Westerners want to participate in, is creating those dynamic environments where people can get together, exchange ideas, create great business models, and go out and solve some of the world's problems, and hopefully at the same time make a little bit of profit. I had this opportunity, as I mentioned, to speak to this group of small and medium-sized enterprises in Lagos, Nigeria, a couple years ago, and I got them all to think about confidence. And the way that I got them to think about confidence was to go into that Warrior 2 stage, if you're familiar with yoga, or the Superman pose, if you're familiar with Superman or yoga, Warrior 3, I think it's called. Because I think what you need more than anything else is confidence that you can do it. So, huge opportunity with population growth, urbanization, high per capita opportunities, import substitution, great people, and then confidence and great business models, and I think you'll end up having great success. However, next slide, a lot of people think that success is a straight line. And regrettably, I've got to tell you, success is not a straight line. It's got some ups and downs and bumps in the roads, and you've got to therefore have resilience. One of the bumps in Africa might be corruption. Another one might be political interference. Another one might be civil war. Another one might be, you know, COVID-19. There's so many different things that are going to impact the execution of your business model. But if you're resilient, if you've got a good team around you, if you know where you're going, I think you'll end up being successful. So thank you very much. To summarize, I think the future, the 21st century, is the century of Africa. It is home to a consumer class that's spending outstrips India's, and it will soon have twice as many cell phones, smartphones, as North America. Think about that. Bigger than India in consumers and bigger than North America in technology. Yet, at the same time, as you well know, poverty remains widespread. You've got huge infrastructure gaps, you've got fragmented markets, and you've got regulatory complexity and issues, corruption, civil war, poverty, etc. But if you can recast these challenges as a catalyst for innovation, and you've got this massive unmet market need, I think you've got a huge opportunity for you. So make change, shatter the plan, evolve, make a dent, because nothing matters unless it really matters, and you can make it matter. Thank you so much for joining me today and listening to me. If you want to follow me, you can follow me at Crombie Capital Partners or briancrombie.com. I've got a nightly radio show in Toronto. I've got a weekly TV show on Canada One TV. And you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram. My handle is Brian Crombie. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and have a great conference. Africa, the continent of the future.